Today I have a very important topic. It is something that is, again, increasing in frequency. It is a very debilitating and serious disease. It is not just a condition that typically affects one part of the body, but many parts of the body. We have had people in this call who suffer from it, and I have seen the miraculous cure given to this individual by Abu as-Sadiq, the riser of the family of Muhammad, and before my eyes, this sister has been healed of this horrible affliction. And the condition and disease that I talk about is rheumatoid arthritis.
By the way, this is extremely exciting. The whole idea of rheumatoid arthritis actually having a cure, and the fact that we have seen it happening in real time in front of us is phenomenal. This is a very exciting segment of Medicine of the Mahdis, and I'm super excited. Are we going to go into the story as well of the sister?
Yeah, well, we can certainly talk about it. So this particular sister of ours, and I'm sure she's also making a testimony about it.
She has actually. We've got one recorded right there. We can actually put it on the screen for the viewers after you're done with the
sure.
intro.
I think that would make more sense. If we do have a video of our sister Sarah, who talks about how she battled with this horrible inflammatory condition over many, many years, and when she finally met the riser of the family of Muhammad, she received, after being treated for years by specialists back in her home country of France, through rheumatologists, she never really got that definitive treatment that she needed. But now she is free of all of these very, very powerful medicines with very powerful side effects, and now she has found this cure from the Mahdi, and how she lives today is completely different to what she lived before in the past. So if we have that clip, let's roll the clip for Sister Sarah talking about how she was healed by Abu as-Sadiq.
En 2018, on m'a diagnostiqué une polyarthrite rhumatoïde. Donc c'est une maladie auto-immune chronique qui s'attaque en fait aux articulations du corps humain, et donc qui provoque en fait le gonflement de la chair entre les os. Les effets qu'il y a eu sur ma vie quotidienne, c'est qu'en fait j'ai eu beaucoup de paralysie, ça provoque énormément de douleurs à mon corps, et aussi j'ai des problèmes de blocage, dont mes genoux, mes mains, mes coudes et autres articulations du corps. J'ai rencontré énormément de docteurs qui m'ont dit qu'en fait cette maladie était incurable, donc j'avais perdu espoir, mais quand j'ai fait Hijra, j'ai pu rencontrer Abu as-Sadiq alayhi salam, et je lui avais demandé s'il avait quelque chose pour moi, mais que je devais venir en fait à une heure spécifique et un jour spécifique. Donc par cela, je lui ai parlé de ma condition, et il m'a proposé justement de soit guérir par la foi ou soit de jeûner. Il m'a dit, si tu as 100% de certitude, de yakin dans ton cœur, tu guériras. Donc il a juste dit le mot « be healed ». Au moment où il a dit ce mot, il m'a complètement guéri, j'ai rien senti en fait. Donc pour moi c'était un miracle. Pour moi c'était un gros miracle parce que j'ai rencontré énormément de docteurs dans ma vie qui ont dit que cette maladie était complètement incurable et qu'il n'y avait pas de remède pour ça, à part juste pour stopper la douleur ou juste réduire la maladie. Pour moi, Abu as-Sadiq, ça a été le plus gros miracle parce que quand il m'a guéri sur le coup, j'ai vraiment rien senti. Et franchement, il m'a complètement libérée. Donc j'ai plus de douleur. Il est véridique, c'est qu'en fait pour moi je sais que c'est l'envoyé de Dieu sur terre et que il est le messager de Dieu et la Hujja sur terre. Abu as-Sadiq, en fait, il m'avait expliqué une histoire, et en fait c'est l'histoire de cette femme qui a demandé à Jésus, que la paix soit sur lui, de la guérir. Et donc en fait il a juste dit sois guéri plus que ta foi.
You heard from Sister Sarah there that she had this horrible condition and she was told by the doctors that there is no cure for it. We have advanced in our treatment of rheumatoid arthritis in terms of the medications that we give. It is a condition, and it's important to understand this, that it is a condition of inflammation where the immune system, for some reason, begins to see the joints as an invasive species, as a foreign entity that it needs to attack and kill, which is of course the purpose of the immune system. It is programmed to attack and kill foreign invaders. but for some reason, it sees these joints, which typically it happens in the joints of the hands, the smaller joints in the wrists, but it can also affect the larger joints. For some reason, the immune system sees something there that it doesn't like and it begins to attack it. There are some now quite established causes for it in terms of the things that trigger the immune system to wrongly attack the parts of the joints that are involved in terms of giving us mobility. And one of those is smoking. So if you're a cigarette smoker, whether active or passive, this we know can trigger those who have certain genes to react to it and create this inflammatory response that we see in the joints, which is of course called rheumatoid arthritis. Other things that we know that cause this are certain types of infections, both bacteria and viruses that we're exposed to. They do something to these joints and then the immune system proceeds to attack these joints. We also know, for example, during hormonal changes, for example, when ladies are nearing the menopause, these hormonal changes create the same issue in the joints that causes the immune system to attack them. So we do know that there are triggers in people who have certain types of genes that create rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis creates inflammation and pain and swelling in joints. It is a very debilitating condition. We have a few images up in terms of the types of joints it affects. We have the joints of the hands, which I believe is the first image. And you can see those joints become narrow. There's erosion of the bone as part of the inflammatory response, and it creates a lot of pain and stiffness. And typically, this pain and stiffness is worse in the morning. People really have their fingers really lock up and they can't fully extend them. But it can also affect the big, what we call synovial joints. And this should be the second image up on the screen, which is your joints like the knee joint, the ankle joint, the shoulder joint, the hip joint, and these larger joints can also be affected. Rheumatoid arthritis is what we call a symmetrical inflammatory disease, which is where it affects both sides. So it very rarely affects just one joint, like gout, for example. Rheumatoid arthritis affects symmetrically. Both hands are usually affected. And in the third image, you can see the degree and extent of damage that the immune system can do to the body when it becomes haywire, when it loses the plot. And you can see how this lady in this image, this picture of her hands, you can see how the hands have deviated, what we call ulnar deviation, when the metacarpophalangeal joints, the joints in the knuckles, become inflamed and damaged by the immune system attacking it.
It's really, by the way, a very horrifying image, and it looks extraordinarily painful. And I know that Sister Sarah, from that testimony video that we just saw, she did have terrible pain that she would experience, and we were there to see it, and it's such a blessing that it was removed from her.
Alia, it's excruciating, and part of the assessment we do for people who develop rheumatoid arthritis is we do a functional assessment, like how functional are they? Do they need to be signed off work? You know, how do we help them in terms of the social impact of the disease? Some patients can take several hours just to get their joints moving again because they're so frozen and stiff, and it takes them sometimes several hours to massage their joints and get them moving again, get themselves going. If the deformities in the hands are really bad, they cannot even do simple things like put a key into a lock and turn it. So you can imagine they can't button their shirts up. You know, these types of things that we take for granted really do become major problems in those with rheumatoid arthritis. Their relationships get affected. They have this chronic fatigue. They have this malaise, this sense of sickness. They can also develop generalized symptoms, what we call systemic symptoms or constitutional symptoms like fever and body aches and pains and things like this as well. So it is a joint disease primarily, but it's also an entire body disease. We know people with rheumatoid arthritis have a higher risk of cardiac complications, neurological complications. They have more likelihood to get lung problems. So it really is a really severe illness. It can get very, very severe. And Sister Sarah, by the way, had one of the most aggressive and severe forms of rheumatoid arthritis, which is the erosive form of it. So yes, so I believe we have the images ready, and you can certainly put them up as I speak. And I was just talking about how this this sort of inflammatory autoimmune disease affects the body. So the cures for it, how do we treat in a conventional way? Before I come to Abba Sadiq's cure, which, by the way, only can come from a man appointed by God, because I could not have in my wildest dreams, or any rheumatologist for that matter who specializes in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis, have dreamed this up and then put it into practice and then seen the results. So what we do is, the first step to treatment is giving people anti-inflammatory medications to deal with the inflammation and pain so people can start using their joints. And the hands, of course, are crucial in terms of our functional everyday activities of daily living. We need our hands to do everything. So the first thing we do is we give them anti-inflammatory tablets. We also give them tablets to protect the stomach, because these anti-inflammatory tablets, although they help with the joints, they can also cause a lot of inflammation in the lining of the stomach. If that doesn't work, then we resort to even stronger medications. And these medications are what we call DMARDs, or disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drugs. The most common ones that are in use are methotrexate, which is what Sister Sarah was taking, but also leflunomide and other such drugs. And these drugs primarily are sort of used to cure the inflammatory aspect of the disease, and they are used second line when the anti-inflammatory tablets don't work. These medications, if they don't work, we go to that third level of using what we call biologics. And these biologics are basically things that work on the immune system directly, or the cascade system that is involved in the inflammatory process. So they're involved in the biological machinery and interrupting their mechanisms to prevent inflammation. So, and by the way, they are very, very expensive to produce and to use. So if you're living in a country like the United States, where or an insurance-dependent country, and you have to somehow pay for these medications. If you're from a third world country, then it's extremely difficult to get a hold of them and very expensive. And not just that, these medicines also have serious side effects, to the point where we have to do what we call a shared care protocol between the general practitioner, which would be me in the community, and the rheumatologist who works in the hospital environment. And we have to make sure that we are very, very closely monitoring these patients, because the drugs that we're giving, the biologicals, the biologics and the DMARDs, they can create liver failure. So we have to monitor their liver. It can create kidney failure. So we have to periodically take kidney tests to make sure they're not going into renal failure. We also have to monitor their blood cells, because bone marrow suppression is a side effect of several of these drugs. So, and if you get bone marrow suppression, you basically become more susceptible to infections, because we know the bone marrow makes red cells, which give us energy and take oxygen around our body and feed our cells, but also bone marrow makes the white cells that fight infections. And also bone marrow makes the platelet cells that cause clotting when we bleed. So people who have bone marrow suppression, they are much more likely to have severe forms of bleeding.
I mean, this barrage of terrible side effects.
Right, it is, and it's expensive, and it's got all these terrible side effects, but they do also help improve the inflammation in the bones. But is there a better approach that doesn't have such an extensive side effect profile?
Is there?
And this is the crucial thing. And of course, I also mentioned that rheumatoid arthritis affects the entire body, and malaise and fatigue are big parts of the picture. And of course, you're going to get fatigued if you get bone marrow suppression from the drugs, because your red cells are not functional. But now, to this critical moment where Sister Sarah received the cure, and I was just completely bewildered and very, very fascinated by it, because it didn't make sense to me. But she was given 2 things to put into practice.
There's a lot of suspense here right now, to be honest. This is quite a drum roll moment.
Well, Alia, it's such a debilitating condition.
Yeah, exactly.
That all those who are listening to me and they have tasted the medicines and its side effects, and they want relief from this crippling disease, which it is, then pay attention, because this is Abba Sadiq's cure to rheumatoid arthritis, and you can see the testimony of Sister Sarah. I saw her with my own eyes, and by the way, she is on no treatment whatsoever. And she hasn't been for the past 6 months plus.
That's a fact. That is a fact.
That is a fact. And you've seen her as well.
Exactly.
Now, Abba Sadiq said there's 2 things you need to do. Okay? 2 items that are found commonly everywhere in every household that we use for many different reasons, and sometimes for pleasure reasons as well. So you've got jelly. And I know it sounds, just hear me out, jelly. Jelly of any kind, any variety, doesn't matter if it has sugar or if it's sugar-free, Jelly is a dessert that kids love and enjoy. It tastes amazing. I would recommend getting the sugar-free version of it. Doesn't matter what brand, what flavor, what color it is. It's just eating jelly. And when you eat jelly, I mean that you try to consume it at 2 to 3 times a day. You could have it after breakfast. You could have it on an empty stomach. Doesn't really matter. You could have it with lunch. You could have it after dinner. The point is that in those first few weeks, you take it as much as you can and as frequently as you can. And this really, really does help, because if you think about jelly as a substance, it is that kind of thing that allows your joints to move more smoothly. It's got this consistency to it that is very much in keeping with that connective tissue that keeps the joints moving smoothly. At least this is what I'm telling myself to understand how this could possibly help, but it has and it does. And the second thing is Vaseline.
Wow.
Petroleum jelly. That's it. I mean, these are the 2 cheapest things that you can buy in a food store or in any kind of shop. To pick up Vaseline and to pick up jelly and to use it to cure rheumatoid arthritis is a staggering, astounding proposition, but it works. Put it to the test. What you do with the Vaseline, Alia, is basically, initially in the first week, you try to apply it all over yourself as much as possible. You want this Vaseline to absorb through the skin and to reach the places that it needs to reach. And Vaseline, of course, has this lubricating effect, which is absent in people with inflammatory joint disease. And if you have a specific part of your body that you suffer more, for example, in your hands or in your wrists or in your ankle or in your knee, you focus the Vaseline more there. The idea is to really be liberal and generous in its application and to apply it as many times as you possibly can. Again, in those first couple of weeks, it's really important that you put in as much time as you can in terms of applying the petroleum jelly on your body. So if I have a knee problem, if my problem is primarily in the knee, then obviously I'm going to be focusing more on applying the Vaseline on my knee. If it's more in my hands, then of course I will constantly, after every time I've washed my hands, douse my hands with Vaseline. And just by doing this, Sister Sarah, over the course of a few weeks, noticed substantial improvement in her pain score, in her stiffness score. The stiffness went down as well, that morning stiffness that really sort of paralyzes you in pain. And she noticed the swelling also began to go down. And as she continued this practice, I was keeping sort of in touch with her. And every week she would say, well, it's gotten better, until eventually, after treating herself for a few months, she came off the jelly and came off the Vaseline and came off the medicine, and everything is better. It has been cured. Incredible. This is the thing. The prophets and the messengers are also doctors, not just of the soul, but also of the body. They have knowledge of all things. And for them, the maxim is there is a cure for every disease, not just merely keeping the symptoms at bay or keeping you on drugs for the rest of your life and monitoring your organs so that they don't go into failure. This is what the Mahdi brings. This is a little sneak peek into the future that is possible in the divine just state when the man appointed by God rules the earth. And I invite people to join this call and to join us and send us your questions so that we can move together forward into this bright new future that is promised by Abu Sadiq, the riser of the family of Muhammad.